The documentary begins by auditing the structural paradox of the Vickers Wellington, a machine that was essentially a flying basket wrapped in fabric. The engineering was the brainchild of Barnes Wallis, who abandoned traditional duralumin ribs and stressed skin designs to create the geodesic airframe. This represented a symmetry-breaking philosophy, where thousands of duralumin struts were woven into a complex lattice pattern that distributed aerodynamic stress across the entire fuselage. The woven wing physics allowed for a massive internal volume while remaining lighter and structurally superior to any contemporary metal-skinned bomber. During the industrial grind of the late 1930s, the Wellington, affectionately known as the Wimpy, became the backbone of the early RAF Bomber Command. The focus remains on the forbidden resilience of the geodesic design. Because the structure was entirely redundant, a Wellington could sustain a direct hit from a 20mm cannon shell that would snap the main spar of a Lancaster or a B-17. The woven lattice would simply absorb the energy, allowing the rest of the airframe to hold together, while the mechanical soul of the production lines utilized specialized illegal tooling to assemble the thousands of individual nodes. The pilot-to-platform interface is analyzed next, focusing on how the Wellington's exceptionally forgiving flight characteristics made it the perfect forbidden classroom for the crews who would eventually lead the 1,000 bomber raids. The act concludes with the physics of the vulnerable skin, where the Irish linen skin created an acoustic terror by vibrating and drumming at high speeds, creating intense psychological strain. This transition from the symmetry of peace to the chaos of war forced the RAF to realize that while the Wellington could survive illegal damage, the lack of self-sealing tanks in early models meant the woven ghost was a glass cannon. This realization set the stage for the machine's evolution into the ultimate midnight trucker.
The narrative shifts from the factory floor to the pitch-black skies of 1940, marking the Vickers Wellington's transition into a symmetry-breaking role as the RAF's primary night-fighting asset. After the illegal attrition of early daylight raids proved that unescorted bombers were sitting ducks, the Wellington evolved into the world's most reliable midnight trucker. The aircraft became the mechanical bridge between the early desperate defense of Britain and the total industrial siege of Germany. This segment analyzes the acoustic terror of the night offensive. The Wellington's geodesic frame was draped in doped linen, a material that led to one of the most harrowing mechanical anomalies of the air war. During intense flak suppression, the fabric skin would often catch fire or be shredded by shrapnel, leaving the aircraft as a ghostly skeleton flying through the air. Because the structural load was carried entirely by the internal duralumin lattice rather than the skin, the aircraft maintained its structural integrity even when the wings were hollowed out by fire. The focus narrows on the mechanical soul of the Bristol Pegasus radial engines. These power plants provided the industrial reliability required for the long freezing hauls over the North Sea toward the Ruhr Valley. The engines were engineered for zero-margin survival, capable of running for hours at maximum stress while the crew navigated by starlight and primitive radio beams. The internal ballistics of the payload are audited here. While later bombers carried more, the Wellington was the first to prove that a consistent nightly siege of German industry could be maintained by a medium-range platform. The act concludes with an investigation into the forbidden resilience of the crews. Operating the Wellington at night required a specific commando mindset. The interior of the plane, devoid of the heavy insulation found in later metal-skinned bombers, became a sub-zero wind tunnel once the fabric was pierced by flak. The woven ghost became a symbol of British defiance, proving that the RAF could hit back with illegal force and refuse to break. The Wellington didn't just carry bombs, it carried the structural proof that a lattice of aluminum and linen could withstand the most violent audit of the 20th century.
The final chapter examines the tactical longevity of the Wellington as it transitioned into its most forbidden role, the U-boat killer. As the air war over Europe intensified, the Wellington was diverted to Coastal Command to solve the symmetry-breaking threat of the German submarine fleet. This segment analyzes the physics of the midnight strike, focusing on the introduction of the Leigh Light scandal. This was a massive, retractable 24-inch searchlight mounted under the fuselage that could generate millions of candle power. The Wellington would loiter silently over the Bay of Biscay, using its ASV radar to audit surfaced U-boats in total darkness, then dive at 200 miles per hour and ignite the forbidden light, blinding the German crews seconds before releasing a payload of depth charges. The narrative then explores the mechanical immortality of the platform through its numerous illegal modifications. The Wellington was the only bomber versatile enough to be fitted with a massive 48-foot magnetic ring, a DWI, directional wireless installation, used to detonate naval mines from the air. This magnetic audit required the pilot to fly at a suicidal 35 feet above the water, relying on the structural integrity of the geodesic frame to withstand the massive shock waves from underwater explosions. This section highlights the global resilience of the machine as it operated in the Mediterranean and Far East, proving that the woven ghost could adapt to desert heat or tropical humidity without its frame warping or failing. The documentary concludes with the legacy of the lattice. While the Lancaster and Halifax took over the heavy lifting of Bomber Command, the Wellington remained in continuous production throughout the entire war, outlasting almost every aircraft intended to replace it. We conduct a final industrial audit of the 11,461 units produced, reflecting on how Barnes Wallis's basket weave geometry redefined the physics of survival. The final cinematic shot captures a Wellington landing in the dawn light with its fabric skin shredded and its metal skeleton exposed, a mechanical resurrection that served as the backbone of victory. The Wellington didn't just survive the war, it wove itself into the very fabric of aviation history as the plane that was simply too tough to fall.